Lord of the Mysteries is an anime that has taken the world by storm, and we are going to be going on a journey on the bizarre lore of Lord of the Mysteries. Hi everyone, I'm here in a library, and I just want to tell you about the research process for a second, because not only did I read the entirety of Lord of the Mysteries, I also scanned through the wiki for hours and hours on end. It took a lot out of me. So if you don't subscribe from this video, I'm going to be mildly depressed. By the way, there are some mega spoilers in this video, so if you don't want to be spoiled for all of Lord of the Mysteries, click away now. Lord of the Mysteries takes place on a modified version of Earth, and we're going to start this timeline by going back. Way back, 13.8 billion years ago. This is Klein Moretti. He's the main character of Lord of the Mysteries. He's not relevant yet, but I just had to remind you what the video is about. So to kick off the universe, a being known as the original creator created the entire universe and all things in it. Of course, this made reality, but it also made different type of worlds, like the spirit world, the astral world, and also fate itself. And naturally, this guy had multiple personality disorder, splitting himself into multiple personas. And out of all the multiple personas that he split himself into, two stood above the rest, and that's the primordial God Almighty, and of course the celestial worthy of heaven and earth for blessings. And I really need you to remember these two names for later because they're going to come back into play a lot. And let's just add one more, the mother goddess of depravity. These are the three strongest beings in the universes that we'll now refer to as the three pillars. The original creator then went to sleep underground. Now let's jump ahead to around 300,000 years ago when Homo sapiens first showed up on Earth. This point of the timeline is just to establish that a good majority of folklore and myths came from the two pillars I previously mentioned. And finally, we can get caught up to near modern day times. There was an incident in Chernobyl where people started to turn into crude oil, but we'll get back to that later inside the video. Now, in 2020, that celestial worthy guy started to prepare just in case he perished and would have to resurrect later on down the road. He did this by kidnapping people, putting them inside cocoons, and then throwing them into the Seraph Castle, which we know as the Grey Fog. Some notable people that he kidnapped were Zoe Mingri, which turned out to be our main character, Klein Moretti, and also Huang Teo, which was Roselle Gustav. Now, at some undefined point after he started kidnapping all those people, the cataclysm happened. This is where the original creator, which was sleeping underground, started to awaken, and then he split into a bunch of different things, like the 22 different pathways that we see, and as well as a bunch of Sephiroths. He also made a giant barrier around Earth, protecting them from the outer deities, which are basically aliens. Yes, they're aliens in Lord of the Mysteries. That is very canonical. This also changed how the continents were shaped, and the main things that you need to know from this is that the Forsaken Land of the Gods is kind of cut off from the rest of the world, and also Australia became the entrance to the abyss. Now, as I'm looking over my notes here, I see that there's a bunch of epochs and a lot of information, but I'm going to try to keep it short and sweet for you. The first epoch was basically a mutant monster battle royale. While all these monsters were fighting over these Beyonder characteristics and everything else, a lot of things started to pop up. And like supernatural races started popping up everywhere, like elves, giants, dragons, trinids, feather serpents, phoenixes, demonic wolves, mutants, sea monsters, naga devils, and evil spirits. CW and God Almighty also killed each other during this time and created the first blasphemy slate. Although technically it wasn't found until the end of the second epoch, so we kind of don't know. That may have been a lie. We'll figure that out later. Now, the second epoch, or the dark epoch, gets really wicked really fast, so just kind of try to stay strapped on for this ride. First of all, this is where 8 ancient gods started to actually appear, and also we had another transmigrator pop up, Amanzes, who is actually the Evernight goddess that we know and love. And also some random dude named the Ancient Sun God appeared out of Chernobyl. That dude then killed all the ancient gods and decided to separate a uniqueness from his body to become Adam. Now you might be asking, what is uniqueness? And that's a great question. I'll explain it to you. Just be taking notes on this. You can only have one per pathway, and think of it like the symbolism or authority of that pathway, and you need it to promote to become a god, which is sequence 0. And this rise of the Ancient Sun God established a new era belonging to mankind, the third epoch. And also, I lied. Technically, Adam wasn't born until the third epoch, but I just wanted a cool segue into explaining what a uniqueness was, so for timeline purposes, he was technically born then. Anyways, the third epoch is separated into two different eras, the Glorious Era and the Cataclysm Era. The Glorious Era was first, and the main things that happened during this was Amon being born and Adam being born, and then the Ancient Sun God had 8 King of Angels under him. And you might be wondering, what is a King of Angels? And you qualify to become one if you're a Sequence 1 Angel who's accommodated more than one Sequence 1 Beyonder characteristics or the uniqueness of that pathway that you're in. And looking back at my notes here, I'm assuming you don't know what a Beyonder characteristic is, and basically the simplest way to think about it is that this is what makes people become stronger. People drop it when they die, it can't be destroyed, and you can also mix this thing into some potions or artifacts. Now, the Cataclysm Era is next up, and this is where we see some important things actually start to happen, like the Rose Redemption that was founded, and they chilled out inside the Giant King's court. This was consisted of those 8 King of Angels I was talking about, and they decided to just turn on our boy Ancient Sun God and literally started eating him for his beyonder characteristics. And after the ancient sun god died, this is where in the timeline the Forsaken Land of the Gods got sealed off from the rest of the world. Now up to this point, we've definitely seen some interesting things, but everything starts taking a turn for the better during the 4th epoch. Now it too is also split up into a bunch of eras, so we're going to start off in the Warring era. Now during this era there was two main things that happened, and that's the true creator being born, which is basically an evil deity, and then the second blasphemy say also being born, which basically gives you cheat codes on how to level up. After that was the first Solomon Empire. Yes, there was more than one. There was this guy named Solomon who became a sequence 0 of the Black Emperor pathway. He then made this super powerful empire and ruled over the entire northern continent. But a bunch of people started getting fed up with how Solomon ran things, so they tried to usurp the throne. And two families came out on top. That's the Tudor and the Trunsuits family. And there's really only two people you need to remember from this, and that's Alista Tudor and Trunsuit themselves. They each became sequence 1 of the Black Emperor pathway, aka the Prince of Abolition. And since these two superpowers were combined into a united empire, humanity started to rise, and the next couple epochs was perfect, and they all loved each other, is what I would say. If it wasn't for the resurrection of Solomon. Everything hit the fan when the Black Emperor was actually about to resurrect, and let me tell you why. In Lord of the Mysteries, if there is a sequence 0, aka a true god, then you cannot have any sequence 1. So if a sequence 0 was to resurrect, it would either forcefully lower them back down to sequence 2, or they might instantly die. And you might be thinking, okay, well you can always swap to a neighboring pathway, which I actually haven't mentioned before. That is a thing, you can actually swap to a neighboring pathway. But in the case of the Black Emperor, there's only one pathway that they could swap to, and you have to advance to swap to that pathway. Trunsuits, being the little stinker that he is, swapped to the Justicar pathway and became a sequence 0 god. And Alista Tudor was just sitting there as a sequence 1, needing to swap to some other pathway or be lowered down. But with his greed and ambition, he decided, you know what, I'm going to put it all on the table, and I'm actually going to swap to a non-neighboring pathway. So Tudor, with the help of some other people, killed 3 sequence 1s of the Red Priest pathway, Medici, Sauron, and Einhorn, to become a half-crazed Blood Emperor sequence 0 of the Red Priest pathway. And because of these actions, it kicked off what we now dub as the War of the Four Emperors. This is where 4 emperors who were all sequence 0 started to fight each other, so it was just gods throwing hands. We had Solomon die, we had Tudor die, we had Trunsuits die, we had so many people die during this time. Also, some dude named Mr. Door got sealed during this time, remember that for later. And lastly, during this time, the true creator was injured and then went to the Forsaken Land of the Gods to hide away. After that era was the conflicts of the 7 gods, and this is where a bunch of the gods all just started throwing hands yet again, but in a different type of way. They're all battling for some type of uniqueness, or they're battling to get stronger or more control over certain things. Basically, you can assume that this is just the rising action to eventually what will follow the end of the 4th epoch. And that came in the form of the Pale Era, and there was 2 people that come into play here, Salinger, aka Death, and the Primordial Demoness. They teamed up and started just wreaking havoc all across the northern continent. They also threw hands with some of the gods, which caused them to be hurt, and they also put cracks on the barrier that surrounded Earth from the outer deities. And due to those cracks, the 7 Orthodox gods had to move to something called the Astral World, which I previously mentioned, and this basically made it harder for them to interfere on things that are happening in the real world. So now, at the start of the 5th epoch, aka the Iron Age, gods no longer walk the land. But real quick, during the 4th epoch, especially near the end, a bunch of things that were happening were actually due to some things that we don't find out until Koi, aka Circle of Inevitability, which is Lord of the Mysteries Book 2, but I will make an entirely separate video on the bizarre lore of Koi, don't worry. Now at the start of the 5th epoch, Orthodox churches were invented, and this was used to pray to the 7 Orthodox gods who were inside the astral world. Now during the 5th epoch, there's a bunch of minor events that happened at first, but we're going to skip to the major ones, and that was when Roselle Gustav was born. And we're going to throw some numbers on here. That was in the year 1125, October 11th, but it wasn't until around 18 years later when Huang Tao transmigrated into his body. And Roselle quickly got busy and had Bernadette Gustav, which was born in the year 1155. And somewhere a little bit after that time, around that 1160-ish mark, is where Roselle Gustav really locked in and started making countless inventions based on his previous memory from our world. And in the year 1173, Roselle overthrew the Intis kingdom and placed himself in a high political position. And in the year 1192, Roselle converted the Intis Republic into the Intis Empire and proclaimed himself Emperor Caesar. He basically started improving everyone's lives, becoming the GOAT using the previous knowledge, and in the year 1198 is when Roselle Gustav actually became a sequence 0 of the Black Emperor pathway. And then he joined the gods inside the astral world, and they all started improving everyone's life. is what I would say if Roselle wasn't assassinated and died in a coup in the year 1198. Now let's jump a little bit into the future here to the year 1327 on March 4th, and that was whenever Klein Moretti was born, the main character of Lord of the Mysteries. Well, he would have been if in the year 1349 he didn't commit suicide and allow Zomingri to transmigrate into his body. We will now be referring to him as Klein Moretti. And this all happened on June 28th, which is coincidentally the same day that they released the Lord of the Mysteries anime, so that was great planning on Cuttlefish's part. Great job there. So now that we are finally caught up with the anime, we can start telling the full story of Klein Moretti. So once Klein was transmigrated, he was instantly met with some mysticism. His head that had a bullet hole in it healed, and he also had a notebook saying that everyone will die, including him. Klein joins the official Beyonders as a Nighthawk and becomes a Sequence 9 seer. He also starts something known as the Tarot Club, where he can pull people up into his Seraph Castle, which is this gray, foggy area. Back to Klein as an official Beyonder, he makes some friends like Old Neil, Dunn Smith, and Leonard Mitchell. Klein and his friends get into way more Beyonder fights than normal, causing him to become suspicious, and he ran into some notable people like Trissy as well as this clown. Klein quickly digested his Sequence 9 potion and was ready for his advancement to Sequence 8 clown. Almost immediately after advancing, one of Klein's best friends inside the Nighthawks, Old Neil, lost control, so they had to put him down like a dog. During this time, there's also a pregnant lady named Megus who had a husband that was a swindler who ran away. And you might be wondering, why does this random pregnant lady matter? Well, it's because she has a bomb inside of her. And it's actually an evil god, but it's basically a bomb. Megus quickly crashes out on the Nighthawks and starts to have the spawn of an evil god descend. So Klein, Leonard, and Captain Dunn all fight Megus. They were actually able to take her down, and we see that Leonard Mitchell was knocked out and Captain Dunn was fatally wounded, but Klein had the opportunity to save his life. And this is where we get this beautiful scene right here. Everyone died and there was one man left standing, and that was Ins Zangwill, the man who set up all the events of Season 1. He was actually using a sealed artifact known as 008, which is one of the most powerful artifacts in the entire Lord of the Mysteries world, and basically what it does is it allows you to write reality itself. He escapes, and that's the end of the Lord of the Mysteries story, or at least it would have been if Klein didn't resurrect. We see this dude come back from the dead, and this was actually due to the Seraph Castle, and then we see him leave his family behind and go move on to become Sherlock Moriarty. In Backland, Klein was a private detective, and he really wanted his get back on Insync Will and the people that related to him, such as Lanevis. This was the swindler husband of Megus who helped with the descent of that evil god. And oh, did Klein get his get back on Lanevis. He found this dude in the sewers and shot this man dead with some tarot cards. Some other major things that happened during this time was that Klein was able to add 2 new members to his tarot club, that's Emmeline White and Fours Walls. We also see more lore on the Forsaken Land of the Gods from Derek's perspective. We see that the original creator, the guy from way back when, was actually one of the people that were worshipped inside the Forsaken Land of the Gods. Back to Klein, we see him steal a card of blasphemy, which is basically something that tells you all of the secrets and the ingredients and how to level up from Sequence 9 to Sequence 0 of that pathway. And the pathway card that he stole is the Black Emperor pathway. We also see Klein start to gain more powerful allies like Sharon, which is a bodyguard that he hired to stop himself from being assassinated. He also found a mirror named Rhodes, which thought of him as like their master because of the gray fog. Klein was able to successfully digest the Sequence 7 Potion Magician and promote to Sequence 6 Faceless during this time as well. While Klein was unraveling the mystery of Insync Will, he had a meteor dropped on his head, but luckily he was saved by his former professor Azek. Immediately afterwards, Klein and Azek stopped the Aurora Order as well as Insync Will from another true creator spawn being dropped onto the earth. Near this time, a great smog also took over Backland and killed 21,000 people. After everything was said and done, Klein adopted new papers, changed his face, and was able to set off to the sea under the name of Gehrman Sparrow. Here he quickly became a bounty hunter on the sea, spreading his name far and wide. He made some new allies like Dantès, who is really his subordinate. He also had some more people join the Tarot Club like Catalea, who was actually a ship captain on the sea as well. And of course we can't forget his new messenger, Renette Tinkerer. Now on the seas he runs into a bunch of important people like Bernadette Gustav. He also participates in a lot of Beyonder fights as well as leveling up to become a marionettist. And the side story of Derek and the Forsaken Land of the Gods is still progressing at this time, and they actually reach near the Giant King's Court, which is ultimately their goal, and it's at this place called Afternoon Town. town. And the other side story of the Tarot Club is also progressing, with each Tarot Club member getting stronger and everyone also sharing information, participating on some side missions, etc. Klein even ran into Inspo yet again at Bainsey Harbor, but both of them escaped, and Klein made his way back to Backland to obtain a new identity under the name of Dwayne Dantès. And looking back, this is one of the most underrated identities. This is where he stacked his bread up and acted as a really rich guy. Some notable things that happened during this time was Klein going on a duo mission with Augur, and they obtained another card of Blasphemy, the Tyrant. We also had Leonard finally find out that Klein Moretti was not fully dead, and he in fact resurrected and was a believer of the so-called Fool. Klein also became friends with a super powerful baby. His name's Will, and he's super chill if you give him ice cream. Klein also tried to sneak into Chanis Gate, which is where the official Beyonders keep a bunch of powerful artifacts. While trying to break in, he actually got sent into this place called Foggy Town by one of the sealed artifacts. Here he ran into some more problems, as well as one of the most powerful Beyonders of the Fool pathway, Zaratul. He escaped from this place, but also let Zaratul back into the world. But now that Klein's back inside the world, don't start thinking that he's just gonna chill out. He actually still wanted his get back on Insane Will, because he escaped from him over and over again. So this dude went on a hunting mission and tracked him down and found him in a place called West Balaam. And you might be thinking he went in there and ran a 1v1 against him. No, he actually decided to jump him with his friends Leonard Mitchell and Madame Dolly. And after a hard-fought battle, they actually did take down Insane Will, but something crazy happened in the aftermath. Adam, yes, the Adam I was previously mentioned, showed up and took the sealed artifact to 008. But he also helped Klein promote to Sequence 4 Bizarro Sorcerer. And now that he reached the level of a quote-unquote demigod, this is where things really start to get interesting and the story picks up as a whole. Klein first returns to Backland and continues his identity of Dwayne Dantès, and in that time frame we also see two new people join the Tarot Club, and that's Leonard Mitchell and also Joe. And the side story with the Forsaken Land of the Gods with Derek is still progressing smoothly as they explore the Giant King's Court and the surrounding areas. Back to Klein, he goes into this place called Groswell Travels, and it's basically a book that holds a divine kingdom. He was accompanied by Leonard Mitchell and Audrey Hall, and you might be wondering, how is he able to not expose his identity when meeting these people of the Tarot Club? Well, that's because he assumed a new identity of the world. And in the timeline, this came right after Derek, so I kind of skipped over that, but it's whatever. After that little excursion, we see Klein come back and start acting as a Bizarro Sorcerer. He then promotes to a Sequence 3 Scholar of Yore. We then see Klein and all of his allies start to concoct a plan to stop a Sequence 1 of the Black Emperor pathway from becoming a Sequence 0. He got a bunch of support from people like William I, Delink, Grove, Twilight Hermit Order, Hermes, and Zaratul, who also brought Sua and the Rose School of Thought, but it was interrupted by Klein and all of his homies like Bernadette, Trissy, as well as Klein, who can pull after images from history now at Sequence 3, with pulling the images of Ariana, Azek, and 017, which is an Angel of Concealment, which is the person who sent him into Foggy Town. He also got some help from the Lord of Storms to crack open a mausoleum. And if you're a little confused about the situation or wondering what's going on, don't worry, no one else has any idea either. Now, while Klein tried to escape the situation, he was intercepted by Zaratul, who was waiting in ambush for him. So to escape, Klein jumped back into Groswell Travels, where he met Adam. And this is where we get the reveal that Adam was actually the true mastermind behind a bunch of events that happened in Lord of the Mysteries. Now, after this great reveal, Klein was able to return back to his hotel and live out his days happily ever after, is what I would say, if Amon wasn't waiting there to jump him. He kidnapped Klein and took him to the Forsaken Land of the Gods, where he tried to steal his fate. And while in the Forsaken Land of the Gods, they stumble across a place called Chernobyl, and this is where Klein realizes that he actually never transmigrated. This is just Earth, but way in the future. Klein was able to escape away from Amon's grasp in the Forsaken Land of the Gods, and he did two major things while he was here. The first was visit this place called Moon City, where all the citizens were in disarray and they desperately needed help. He stepped up and converted them all into believers of the Fool. And this is where we see the religion of the Fool really start to pick up the pace. And the second and more major thing that he does is meet up with Derek from the Tarot Club and his expedition team, and they go inside the Giant King's Court. They all battled this person named Sassir, and they were actually able to breach the Forsaken Land of the Gods seal and open up the door to see light. Klein then leads everyone to safety back inside the real world and away from the terrible place of the Forsaken Land of the Gods. And while those people get set up inside the new world, we see Klein advance to Sequence 2 Miracle Invoker, and he adopts the identity of a wandering magician named Merlin Hermes. He performed some miracles across the lands, but he started to then think about how he's going to advance to Sequence 1, and to do so he had to build a marionette town and control it. So he started this new place called Utopia. And from here on out, everything starts to get very abstract and confusing, so I'm going to try to keep it grounded and not use too many super technical Lord of the Mysteries terms here. So Zaratul, that high sequence beyonder of the Fool pathway, tries to jump Klein inside of Utopia with the help of Adam. He was able to run away and escape, but unfortunately Adam gave gave humanity to one of his personas and it stabbed him in the back. He then fell into Adam's divine kingdom and they had a short conversation. Klein then killed himself and then resurrected, killed Zaratul, and then advanced to Sequence 1 Attendant of Mysteries. This made Klein officially become a king of angels. Now, do you remember that celestial worthy guy you threw those people into the Seraph Castle to resurrect? Well, Klein Moretti was his vessel to try and resurrect into, so he also had to battle the corruption from this guy trying to literally awaken inside of his body. And he found out that the best way to do so was to battle against him and contend for the Lord of the Mysteries title as a pillar of the universe. So Klein goes to the top of the Hornacious mountain range and hopes to become a Sequence 0 god by accommodating the uniqueness of the full pathway. And as he advances to a Sequence 0 god, all the other gods start to pick and choose what side they're going to be on, either against him or with him. Overall, he was able to promote to a Sequence 0 fool, and then he returned to the Seraph Castle, but while he was in there, he got jumped one more time by Amon. This is where we get one of the best fights inside the entire web novel, Klein versus Amon in a 1v1 inside of Seraph Castle to see who will become the next Lord of Mysteries. After a hard-fought 1v1, Klein was able to drop a supernova on his head and won. Amon was able to live, but he got a lot of his characteristics stolen from him, as well as the uniquenesses, which gave Klein the ability to advance to become a Lord of the Mysteries. Now, before he advanced, he held a last-minute meeting with the Tarot Club and assigned everyone their own personal missions. Afterwards, Klein released all of the other humans that were inside the Seraph Castle cocoons that were supposed to be vessels for Celestial Worthy, and then he entered his own state of slumber to try to battle the Celestial Worthy. Now, book 1 ends with a beautiful time skip as we see Melissa and her new niece Alice pray to Mr. Fool.